Let's talk about how the infinitive constructs are used. Ross mentions the nominal uses of the infinitive construct. What does that mean? It simply means that the infinitive construct can function as a noun. Okay? It functions as a noun. And I told you, an infinitive construct is a verbal noun. Okay? So just as we wrote down just a little earlier, a sentence like to err is human, in English, the infinitive here is functioning how? What's the infinitive use here? It's the subject, okay? So infinitives can do what nouns can do. Nouns can be subjects, and so can infinitives, can't they? And this is true in English also. So let me give you an example here. Let's say we have something like Tov Pakod et Hamelech. Okay, what does Pakod et Hamelech mean? Okay. Yeah, you've given me the whole thing. So you're ahead of the game here. But look, I have just this part, okay? This is an infinitive construct in Hebrew. This is the et direct object marker, okay? So, this is the act of visiting who? The king, okay? So this king is the direct object of the infinitive. And all of that forms the subject. And Tov is the predicate adjective, isn't it? So the act of visiting the king is good. We could also translate this as to visit the king is good. And in Hebrew, I've put my predicate adjective first. I could translate it in the same order. Good is the act of visiting the king, or good is to visit the king, which that's a little bit less normal for English. So to visit the king is good. So I have a copular construction, one with a predicate adjective, and this whole infinitive construct phrase is functioning as the subject of it. Okay, so I just want you to see that it is possible to see infinitive construct forms fulfilling noun positions in a sentence. Let's look at another situation where an infinitive construct could be in a slot where normally a noun goes. Let's think about this expression. Pakod ha'ish. In Pakod ha'ish, what I have is I have an infinitive construct here and a noun here, and what they're doing is they're filling the positions of thing 1 and thing 2 in a construct chain. Okay? What normally fills the 2 slots of a construct chain? What kind of words? Yeah, they're usually 2 nouns slapped up next to each other, and they form a unit. Noun 1, noun 2, or what I like to call thing 1, thing 2. But guess what? I can put an infinitive construct in that first position to fill a noun slot as well. So it is the act of visiting of the king, which would be the king's act of visiting. You see that? I'm sorry. Yes. I've got king on the brain. Sorry about that. My bad. Yes. Thank you. The man's visiting. Okay? The act of visiting of the man, or the man's act of visiting. Okay? So, just like I could have sus ha'ish. There's a construct chain where the first member of the construct chain is in fact a noun. the horse of the man, which is the man's horse. The visiting of the man is the man's visiting. Okay.
So in the construct relationship, the second noun will basically be describing the noun and what the noun is doing at the same time?
Yeah, what it's going to do is usually it's going to indicate, if this is an infinitive construct in the first position, the second position will frequently indicate the subject of it. So it could indicate the direct object of it, but frequently it's going to indicate the subject of it. So the man's visiting means the man is the one doing the visiting. All right? Now, so here's the deal. Let me just go backwards to our little chart over here. So because infinitives are verbal nouns, they are nouns. So they don't have personal endings like the cow perfect does. The cow perfect has actual verbal personal endings that indicate the subject. What these infinitive construct forms are doing as nouns is, if I ever want to indicate whose act it was, I can't use personal endings. I'm using pronoun suffixes. Pronoun suffixes are different than perfect personal endings. Okay? So one thing about infinitive construct is that in and of itself, the infinitive construct is not marked for person, gender, and number as a feature of its verbal inflection. It doesn't have person, gender, number. It is impersonal. It is just the act of visiting, the act of eating, the act of snoring. It's just talking about the bare verbal action. And if I want to indicate whose act of eating, snoring we're talking about, then I don't use personal endings. I use pronominal suffixes. Okay? So to go back over here, if I want to use an infinitive construct for some reason, but I also want to specify whose act it is, and I want to use a full noun for it, then I can put it in a construct chain like this. The act of visiting of the man, meaning the man's act of visiting, or the act of visiting of David, Pekod David, David's act of visiting. And then, of course, just like I can take nouns and add pronominal suffixes to them, as in Suso, the horse of him, I can take an infinitive construct and put a pronominal suffix on it. Pokdo, which is the act of visiting of him, which is his, right, in both of these. His horse, his visiting activity. Okay?
And I say that again in a way to clarify the difference between his act of visiting and then why that changes where you don't use the pronominal suffixes. I didn't catch any of that. I was trying to listen.
I'm sorry. Are you talking about what I just wrote, or are you talking about what was up above?
The difference between what was written up above and this down below. Could you clarify that, please?
Yeah, well, what was written above is an example of what we're dealing with here. Are you talking about this above, right here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here, what we're talking about is simply how to form the infinitive construct when you want to attach a pronominal suffix to indicate whose verbal activity we're talking about. But what we have to remember is that when we use an infinitive construct, right, infinitive, the prefix in means not, okay? Infinitives are not finite. They are not indicating a specific person doing something. infinitives are simply talking about the bare verbal action. So the infinitive itself is just the act of whatever that action is. Okay? So I could say something like, the act of visiting is fun. The act of visiting is fun. Or as we had over here, to err is human. I'm not specifying anything about who is erring in that sentence. It's not finite. There's no subject to that verbal action. It's just any act of erring is human. Okay? Now, if I want to specify whose act it is, then I have to do something additional to the infinitive in order to do that. And in Hebrew, what I have to do is I have to add pronominal suffixes to it. And those pronominal suffixes are the same sorts of things I attach to nouns, because the infinitive is a verbal noun. I'm not going to attach personal endings like I did in the cow perfect. Okay? That's the important point here. This is what I'm trying to help you get. Infinitive constructs are not inherently marked by person, gender, number. Whereas, if you go to a cow perfect, there's no such thing as a cow perfect verb that doesn't have person, gender, number. Every cow perfect verb you meet has a person, gender, number assigned to it. You can never just have a cow perfect with no person, gender, number. Someone did that action, and it's either he, she, you, I, they, y'all, or we. Okay? Infinitives can be impersonal because inherently they are impersonal. They don't inherently mark any one specific person's action. They just indicate the bare action. So if I want to indicate whose action it is, then I have to add something additional. I have to add the pronominal suffixes to them to say his act of visiting and my act of visiting and so forth. Now, to go back down here, all I'm doing is I'm showing you the nominal uses of the infinitive construct. That is to say, I'm showing you how the infinitive construct can fill any function slot that a noun can. One of the function slots here is that the noun can take a pronominal suffix, the horse of him, and the infinitive construct can do what a noun can do, and it can take a pronominal suffix as well. The act of visiting of him. That's all I'm doing, is I'm just showing you the different ways that an infinitive construct can do the same thing that a noun can do.
Yes, thank you very much. You just lost me the first time at the is human.
Oh, okay. Got you. Well,
thank you.
You're human then, aren't you? All right. All right. Now, up at the top of page 163, he mentions some other ways that the infinitive construct can behave like a noun. It could be a direct object of a verb. Okay? So in this example, he has chadalti kathov. So look at there. Chadalti kathov. Here's my infinitive construct. Okay? And this is my verb, I stopped. So I stopped what? I could say I stopped Superman. And that would make me pretty amazing and spectacular. But if I stopped Superman, Superman would be my direct object, right? But here, the infinitive construct from kathav is kathov. I stopped the act of writing. You see? So there my infinitive construct equals a direct object. And that is what a noun usually is. Nouns are usually direct objects, but infinitive constructs could also be direct objects. So that's one situation. We already saw how an infinitive construct could be a subject. That's also something nouns do. And then they could also be the object of the preposition. Usually my object of the preposition is a noun. But I could also make an infinitive construct the object of a preposition. So his example here is b mol ko. So take a look there at b mol ko. This is the verb malach, which means to reign, And I have the Kametz Ketuf silent Shiva pattern because I have a pronominal suffix on it. So this is to rain, or the act of raining. Whose act of raining? The pronominal suffix tells me his act of raining, but all of that is the object of the preposition bet. Okay, so the preposition bet has mol ko as the object of the preposition. And what we're going to see is that when you add the preposition bet to an infinitive construct, it has the sense of when. It's temporal. When he reigns, literally in his act of reigning. In his act of reigning. In the middle of his act of reigning means when he reigns. All right, so again, we're just pointing out that grammatically, infinitive construct forms can take the place that nouns take in their own structures.